We often think of the domesticated dog as the quintessential model for domestication. The dog is said to be the first animal to be domesticated by humans, having gone from a free-ranging wolf species to an extremely tame, floppy-eared companion that can be selectively bred into hundreds of so-called breeds. Yet, in seeming contradiction, it is also well known that humans did not intentionally domesticate dogs, at least at first. There are sound theories that suggest that dogs evolved a higher level of human tolerance and hung out in the vicinity of human dwellings before the purposeful breeding of the canids became a regular occurrence. This means that dogs essentially evolved into domesticates on their own accord, a process called self-domestication, and a similar evolutionary history has been proposed for cats as well. When it comes to the idea of a pet red fox, you'll often hear that a fox shouldn't be a pet because it is not domesticated. However, how true is this claim? We know that the red fox, like many other species, has been extensively bred in captivity, and some states even consider red foxes, which in the United States descend from the fur trade, to be some level of domesticated. The Russian farm fox experiment is a very famous study that has shown us that red foxes can be selectively bred for tameness, just like other species. Therefore, what separates a fox from a dog in terms of so-called domestication? As previously mentioned, dogs are self-domesticated, having evolved higher levels of human tolerance, and it is said that this has led to a change in their brain size and other physical traits. Well, we now know that the same process is occurring with red foxes in England. The theory of domestication syndrome, first coined by Charles Darwin, denotes phenotypical similarities between domesticates as a result of breeding for tameness. In London, there is a population of friendly urban foxes that are adapting to life in the city, and they have undergone genetic changes that mimic what we've seen in some other popular domesticated animals. According to a 2021 study that compared the skulls of urban and rural living red foxes in England, due to fox culls in the 1970s, scientists were able to analyze the skulls of over 200 foxes from this time period. The urban foxes had shorter, stronger snouts and wider muzzles than country-living foxes, possibly as an adaptation for procuring human refuge and crunching on leftover bones, and smaller brain size capacity as their urban meals don't tend to run away. The rural foxes in the study may have had a longer snout to increase jaw closing speed to catch prey such as voles, mice, and rabbits. In fact, up to 37% of the city fox's diet consists of scavenged food. There was also less of a difference between male and female city-living foxes. Adapting to life around humans actually primes some animals for domestication, said co-author Dr. Andrew Kitchener from National Museum Scotland. The researchers have stressed, however, that these self-domesticating foxes are not house pets, and that the animals are nowhere near as domesticated as familiar animals like dogs and cats. As was written in the study, while not domesticated, urban foxes show reductions in muzzle size, reduced sexual dimorphism, and a narrowed brain case, and it is plausible that taking up residence in the presence of humans would favor individuals with reduced levels of fear and stress, i.e. urban tameness, as it has in other animals. The researchers do not answer one imperative question, however, and this question is what compromises all of our research pertaining to domesticated animals. Just what is domestication? When does an animal become domesticated? As is often the case, the scientists appear to use proximity to dog and cat appearance and behaviors as a litmus test on which to measure the degree that an animal is domesticated. But this doesn't make sense, as most animals that are considered to be domesticated vary tremendously. In addition to that, dogs and cats, unlike several other species, were not initially directly selectively bred by humans. In fact, the domestication history of both dogs and cats more directly mirrors that of the London living foxes than domesticates like rats, guinea pigs, cows, and goldfish, which became domesticated in human-controlled environments. One of the scientists claimed that the foxes never move any farther down the path to domestication, and that they don't know why. However, as there is no scientific definition of what truly defines a domesticated animal, There is no such thing as moving down a path of domestication, as domestication is more of a spectrum for which species and their traits will differ. Furthermore, urban foxes might, in the eyes of the scientists, move down this path to become more similar to dogs and cats if they are selectively bred for this goal, just as what occurred with domestic hamsters and the foxes in the farm fox experiment. The environment in which the foxes are raised is also not considered. As the urban foxes are not raised in captivity, they are far less likely to adapt to it successfully, giving them the traits of a so-called wild animal. This is not dissimilar to wild-born feral cats, which are genetically indistinguishable from a tame house cat, but often have an irreversible lower tolerance to humans and captivity. Perhaps if the city-dwelling foxes were bred and raised more similarly to dogs and cats, their domestication would be even more apparent. Of course, as the city foxes have already attained a higher level of tolerance to human presence, they could possibly be predisposed to becoming more similar to dogs and cats. It certainly helps, if your goal is to breed animals that are more tame and tolerant of humans, to start with a population of animals that have already evolved these traits naturally, as has been the case with dogs and cats. After that, selective breeding is simply a matter of refining these traits. Interestingly enough, red foxes in Canada are not following the same path as the foxes in Europe. This could be due to these foxes being of a different lineage, the differences in the expansiveness of the cities in the two regions, and several other theories. The urban fox study highlights just one of many ways that our actions can affect the evolution of wildlife, while also providing insight into the process of so-called domestication. It's not as simple of a concept as one might think, particularly in how it relates to what we think makes a suitable pet.